Feed conversion efficiency. This is just some Dairy Australia stuff, you know, because they've acknowledged this as being a reasonably important, you know, thing to be thinking about. I don't think they've built on this extension as well as they could have, and this is some older stuff that probably came up from grain to milk type project. We need to look at it again. We see these full sets of ranges, okay, of grams of milk solids per kilogram of feed dry matter. And again, this is stuff that you guys can all probably, you know, calculate or get some help calculating, because what it really tells you is what's at the core of how your business is really going. Because if all your costs and all your assets are about feed, okay, knowing what you're doing in this space and whether you're sitting down here at 68 or 75 in this system, or, you know, a lot of these I see it well under 100. It's pretty rare you actually see it get over 100. All right. So, I mean, okay, look, just straw poll, kilograms of milk solids per cow per day. What are people sort of doing at the moment?
Probably 1.7, probably.
1.7, okay. So that's 1.7. We'll just use Scott, because you put your figures up and you're pretty open about it. So you're doing 1.7 kilos of milk solids per cow a day, so you'd probably be feeding about 18 kilos of dry matter at the moment, maybe 19?
About that, a little bit more maybe.
Maybe 20?
Yeah,
okay.
So the 20, they're pretty well fed.
Yep, so if they're 20 and you're sitting down probably here, you know, somewhere about, what it'll be 85, I think it'll be.
Yeah,
85.
Probably
All right. So you're at this end. Yeah. Now, back in your day when you were doing 28 litres off 20 kilos of milk solid, a fair bit of grain, but can be the right decision. High quality pastures, a bunch of things at the right price. Absolutely.
That's economical.
Very much so. Still could be economical now, though, Scott.
Yeah.
All right. If you're buying your grain at the right price. Yeah. And that's where that barley, you know, which we talked about, changes the equation. But understanding where you sit in here is really, really important, because it really says if I'm down here, okay, or on this side for these different feeding systems, I've got room to move, all right? Now, some of that might be because of cost, but some of it might be because of management. Some of it could be just by having fresher cows, okay? Some of it can be by controlling feed wastage, all right? Some of it can be by offloading poor performing animals. Some of it can be from growing heifers properly. You know, it's a huge impact. If you've got little heifers coming into the herd, for every kilo they've got to put on in the herd, you're basically doing yourself out of about 6 litres of milk. Okay, that's just on the energetics. Plus they're smaller, so they can't eat as much and do as much milk either. All right, so there's a whole heap of knock-on effects here that feed into this equation. It's not just what you feed, it's the whole management system. And it becomes critically important, okay, in drought when your feed costs are high. It's important all the time, Sheena. It's part of that equation of how do we make more money when things are good. We don't forget this stuff, all right? But when things are bad, this is what keeps you in business.
Don't lose the focus though when it picks up.
Exactly.
That just, first time I've seen that. You know?
Yep.
So the good thing about that is it talks about your system and where you should be achieving.
Yeah.
And where, you know, the guide balls are.
Yep.
And that's, you know, no different dairy farm monitor, whatever we talk about is, that's why you don't talk at the pub about, you know, I should be at 1 kilo of milk solids per kilogram dry matter, when if you're bringing everything in and your red grows or whatever, they should be at the 1.6.
Absolutely.
You know? So it's understanding where you're at.
Look, and it's a fundamental failure of what happened in some parts of Australia, okay, which were previously supported with relatively good milk prices. Okay, and all of a sudden feed got expensive. Now a lot of those farms had developed feeding systems based on doing 20, 22, 24 litres a cow on a high milk price and cheap feed. Now when the milk price didn't go up and the feed prices went up dramatically, this is what killed them.
Yeah, there are 5 systems, but operating at number 1.
Yep. Yeah. As efficiency.
Yeah.
Just doesn't work.
Paying for a 5 and getting a 1 return.
Yep. Yep. So I've got like you were there, Ron, I think, when we did the full day on feed conversion efficiency, but that's a story for another day if ever I'm lucky enough to be re-invited back.
But I tell you what, it was good. I went home and I adjusted things and done lots of things, what people said don't do, and I tell you what, it's worked.
Yeah. Yeah, you came out to that, didn't you? At Dubbo. We did that session on feed conversion efficiency. Yeah. All right. So, feed. Okay, these are just, again, questions you need to offer, and these are things that I guess we like to think about with our clients, and without going again any specific rabbit holes, it's just really worth talking this through as feed tightens. You know, it is really, really important for all of you guys to have a good handle on what you actually have in reserve. All right, and it becomes increasingly important as the time ticks down on the dam, because this is going to allow you to do some realistic calculations as we get closer as to whether we hold or fold or you know, go do things a bit differently. So keeping a regular inventory and stock take on your forages and understanding how long you've got to feed that with is really, really important. So Sheena, again, numbers,
I won't hand this out now.
beautiful.
but
Back of the envelope feed budgets,
Yep.
excellent.
got
all right.
some resources here on a lot of what Nan was talking about.
Yeah, and then again, it's feed budgeting's a whole nother day session, but it's really, really important to understand that, look, you know, on average, cows need somewhere between 5 and 8 tonnes of dry matter a year, okay, across the 12 months, depending on cow size and production system. You've got to work out where that's going to come from the next 12 months, all right, and think that through.
Monitor is worth its weight in gold.
Absolutely, yeah.
It makes you do
Your inventories.
Yeah, everything.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, no, it's terrific. Yes.
Quick question, going forward, do you think the recommendations for what farmers should have in their feed reserves will change? Like whether you believe in climate change or not, I guess.
Yep.
Is it going to change that you add an extra 12 months on what feed you should have in an ideal situation? If we get a good season, yeah, depending on like if you're a coast versus inland farmer
Yep.
too.
Catherine, it's a great question, and we keep getting told to prepare for drought. The problem is, if the inventory cost for businesses to put down 12 months of feed is not sustained by any milk pricing model that we know. Okay, so where's the money going to come from to do that? Because even to put down feed when it's at its lowest price, you know, it's vast amounts of money that I won't go through, and there's just not the money in the system. I think though, you know, people can do a lot to prepare better. Like, you know, we've got a huge. There is capacity to nab surplus. There is a tendency when conditions are good for some farms that I see go one of two directions. When things are good, they either go, relax, I don't need to do as much, or they go, I'm going to go like Billy-O, and I'm going to double my inputs, and I'm going to put down what I can because I don't know when it's going to rain next. Okay, and that's very much, I guess, the model we've adopted in Bega, okay, where we don't know what month of the year it's going to rain down in Bega. It's completely random climate down there. So when things are good, you go as hard as you possibly can while you can, because you don't know when it's going to come back again. So in that space, we do what we can with the resources we've got, and we keep building, and hopefully that'll be enough. But if we relax and say, oh, easy times, these are the guys that we constantly see run out of feed, all right? And that next drought mentality just isn't there. And I don't think this is seriously drought, okay, but it's the next dry time, or the next flood if you're on the coast, or the next thing that stops us from growing feed. Yeah. So look, I think that's important. There's some other big macro factors I do think we need to think about though. And I think one of the things that we've observed is that there are aspects of the beef and sheep market that have woken up big time in this drought to what you can achieve with grain. All right? And it is going to shift the dynamics of feed availability as we move forward. The returns for feeding sheep and beef, grain, have been phenomenal for those guys that are doing it well, and those guys won't remember. We've got to remember there's about 20 million beef cows in Australia, and about, you know, but that's all right, they'll be back. Okay, but our dairy is a much smaller part of that market. Okay.
These prices not going anywhere.
No, no, it's not. It's only going to keep going up. So those guys will understand that if I can send carcasses out at $5.50 or $6 a kilo dress weight, and I can buy grain at 300, I've got a new big competitor on the market. And that's been one of the issues with this drought, has been the ongoing competition for feed reserves by the beef and sheep sector, whereas in the millennium drought they dropped out. Okay, because it wasn't worth feeding lamb. So if you can get 250 or 300 bucks for a fat lamb, you're going to feed it a couple of kilos a week. Yeah. So it's something that we need to think about as a dairy industry from a risk management perspective, is getting better at securing feed when it's cheap. And I guess we're pretty strong advocates this year, is that if you are a grain user, that you should be out there contracting now. all right, for what you're going to use, because the probability of grain going down 30 bucks a tonne from now to next harvest is small. The probability of it going up by another 100 is pretty good, okay? So if you can get it out there and you can work out what you need, okay, for some feed budgeting for the next 12 months, getting your hand on that now, if you're a grain user rather than being locked in as a pellet or a mash user, all right, does give you something that you can control quite well. At least you know where you're heading. Your downside of your chance of it going down in price is much lower than the chance of it going up a fair bit. And it's at its low point now. Same with hay, if you need hay. So what feeds can we access? We'll talk a bit about that. Are you keeping as many channels to feed open as possible? I'll talk about this now. I think one of the characteristics when feed gets really tight that we work with our clients is having them buy feed from as many people as possible, okay? So if they've got someone that they get grain from, someone that they get pellets from, someone else has got something else, keep buying just a little bit so you can stay in those markets, all right? Because what we've seen is when people have dropped out of one buying chain because they've chased just a cheap price here, it's been much harder to get back in if they need it later on. Right, and the pellet companies are a good example of this. I mean, they've done a great job supplying some good feed, all right? But what we've seen is that if people have dropped one of them to chase a cheaper option, then they haven't been able to get back in when the cheap option runs out and they want pellets again, all right? Similarly with your grain traders.
Even us as the forage seller, we're in home control buying stuff from our suppliers.
Yes.
And they won't actually let us buy more than what we bought last year. So if we've got
Yep.
a supplier that we bought 300 tonnes from,
Yep.
this year we can't buy 350 tonnes. They're saying
No,
you can only buy 300
you're
tonnes
capped.
this year.
You're capped, and we've seen that with DDG, okay? And DDG has been a wonderful feed that's helped out a lot of people and a really good product to come onto the farms. But there's not a lot more of it out there, and that issue, if you want to use twice as much, it may not be there. Or if you're a new person that wants to come onto it, that could be difficult. Or alternatively, if you dropped out of it to do something else, to chase a bit of grain, it's been hard to get back in. So we'd say if you want to chase a bit of grain, keep a bit of your other pellet coming through as well. So you've got more fingers into more potential supply options. It's a really, really important drought strategy if you've got the ability. Keep your options open and keep working with the people that have looked after you. Hay and forage plan this summer. All right, so hay, the time is seriously, if you are thinking about buying hay, you know, we've heard, and this is interesting because you're saying the people up the coast thought they had it sorted, you know, for next year, and a few of them do, but I know a lot of them don't, and just having one or two loads secured isn't sorted, all right? So while we know that there is a fair bit of hay around now, we've seen a fair bit of activity from the charities going up and buying hay. Okay, a lot of activity, and that's going to be great for the people that receive it, but it's also forced the price up on hay in the close areas quite quickly. Okay, and that's markets, that happens. But again, we've also seen a lot of activity from speculators, okay, buying large amounts of hay and putting it in sheds. All right, not users, so just like water speculators, but they're hay speculators, and there's seen a lot of that activity down in the south. All right, so while there was this vast pool of hay there, if hay is embedded as part of your system purchase feed, I'd be looking very carefully right now at what you normally use in 12 months and buying that as a minimum, all right? And then going beyond that, okay, I'd say, well, look, if I know that normally by the end of spring, I've normally got 200 tonne of dry matter of forage, okay, I'd be saying, well, where's that going to come from? Because spring's gone and I don't have that. All right, and maybe making up some of those deficits. It's very hard to go out, and this is to get back to your point, Catherine, to go out and fully hedge and buy your whole next 12 months feed supply because the money isn't there on most businesses to do that. But going out to a point where you'd normally go and working with your credit networks potentially to do that or other funding sources to get it secured now is going to be really, really important. Okay, because while the prices are reasonable at the moment, landed, and that interface between kilogram of hay and litre of milk is pretty good. You know, it's at about that 40-60 point. So we can still turn a margin. We'd much rather be doing it on 15 cents grass. But in the absence of that, you're going to make more off 40 cents of hay than you are off $0 of thin air. Okay? Concentrates, we'll talk a little bit more. What's your concentrate strategy beyond spring? You know, we've classically looked at green, at grain, but I think this year we'll talk about a couple of examples of some other non-grain concentrates that have had a huge impact on a few of the farms who have used it. Okay, and they've been fed in conjunction with TMR rations or even as self-feeding type options. So we'll talk a bit about palm kernel, and we'll talk a bit about the soy hull pellets that have also been available, and I'll go into a bit of detail about that a bit later, but they've been excellent feeds that have been really useful for people and easy to integrate into most feed systems. How carefully are you working through this freight subsidy issue? We'll talk through that in a second. And again, this stuff's gold. You know, are we using feed efficiently and minimising wastage? Okay, we still go out onto lots and lots of farms and see hay being fed out on the ground. All right. When we did the feed wastage study with Dairy Australia, we measured up to 25% wastage for feeds fed out on the ground. So you start thinking about that feed that you're buying for $400 a tonne, what they're actually eating is probably worth well over $500 a tonne for what they actually eat. So, you know, strategies to control wastage and integrating those facilities, okay, that you've invested in, they're no-brainer. They pay for themselves. And even in simple feeding systems, having good hay racks, okay, adequate numbers of hay racks, keeping things clean to minimise the wastage, because just because you've made the feed yourself doesn't make it any cheaper. Okay, Scott's hay isn't worth $200 a tonne, it's worth $600 a tonne, because that's what he could sell it for. All right? So even though it's homegrown, its actual value is what you could sell it for.
That's right.
Yeah. So it's gold.